Hey guys, Hop here. I just got back from shooting the Forgotten Weapons Moons Out 2025 match in West Virginia, and I'm going to go over the gun that I use and the match. Normally, I would be filming this kind of video outside in the woods where I belong, but unfortunately, my cat, Mr. Sacco, got injured, and he required veterinary care, and so I'm stuck at home babysitting him for at least a little while. Want to say hi, buddy?
Mr. Hop, how are you doing today?
Tired. Moons Out is a night vision shooting event put on by Forgotten Weapons and hosted by the One Shepherd Institute out of their home range of Echo Valley Training Center in West Virginia. Last year I went with Brassfax and Luke, and I had kind of 1.5 gimmicks to make the match a little bit more interesting for myself. The big one was that I was using a Psionics Opsin digital night vision monocular because I wanted to test it out, and I also wanted to use it to get a complete first-person record of the event.
What do we call this loadout?
I'm going to die soon.
I also had an additional 50% of a gimmick because I was using a D-Ball A4, which on paper should have all the same capabilities as a Maul C1, meaning it would be an extremely capable laser. In practice, it turns out to be very cumbersome to use and did probably cost me a little bit of time. The digital night vision was obviously the primary gimmick last year because it just doesn't have the same raw, low-light performance as real analog night vision. I didn't plan on using any gimmick equipment this year. I just used my regular Gen 3 binocular night vision, substantial improvement over the digital monocular from last year, and I was using a night vision AK setup. A lot of people saw that and I think assumed that that was supposed to be a gimmick, but it really wasn't. It's set up in a way that should give it every capability that I could possibly need during the match. It has the ability to passive aim, a powerful IR laser aiming module, and no real ergonomic compromises. So I expected to do a little better this year than I did last year, but instead I did substantially worse. So we're going to talk about how I had my night vision AK setup and what went wrong with it at this year's Moons Out 2025. Let's go for it. Today's video is brought to you by our channel sponsor, Venture Surplus, which is where I got the cold weather layering clothing that I was wearing at Moons Out 2025. Summer is just around the corner, and if you're thinking that means you don't have to worry about layers, guess what? Not how it works. Just like Underworld said, sun goes down, temperature drops. If you got nice and moist during the day from activity or getting rained on, even if it was warm, once the temperature goes down, you're going to turn into a human sickle pretty fucking fast. You need to be able to stay cool when you're moving, warm when you're stationary, and above all, you need to stay dry. And that's going to take 3 different garments at least. Check out Venture Surplus at the link in the video description and use the code provided to save 10% off your order. They have a whole bunch of military surplus gear, equipment, and clothing. US military surplus is made in America. It's very durable, and it comes in a lot of cool colors, and also a lot of really lame ones. Thank you to Venture Surplus for their continued support of this show. Thank you guys very much for watching. Let's get back into the video. My weapon of choice for Moons Out 2025 was my PSAK 104 American Bastard, this time with a full set of Texas Weapon Systems furniture installed. The TWS handguard has a longer continuous length of top rail versus the Midwest AK Alpha handguard that was on there before, which gives you a lot more options for setting up your lasers and controls. System's dogleg rail dust cover for my optics mount. There is a problem of escalating height over bore when you're accessorizing the AK platform. If you mount any sort of laser box or even a remote switch onto the top rail, then your optic, which normally on the AK platform is mounted quite low down, will end up being partially or completely occluded by all the accessories you're putting on the front of the gun. You can get around that by using an optic that would sit at absolute or lower 1/3 height on an AR, but when you put one of those things onto an AK, you end up with absurd mechanical offset, and you've cost yourself any chance at having a cheek weld. There is one way around this. It's what Brassfax did for his night vision AK, so I just copied that. The laser aiming module I used was the 3 Electrons DIR-V, which is the flattest, lowest sitting laser on the market. It sits low enough on the rail that I can use a low mounted red dot, in this case a Trijicon MRO HD in the lowest factory mount, and still have a clear view through the optic. A low mounted red dot on an AK sits about where a normal height optic would sit on an AR, and that means it was plenty tall enough for me to passive aim as well. So right off the bat, I have an extremely capable laser aiming module. It's very easy to access because the switch to control it is on the device itself, easily accessed from a firing grip, and I have the ability to passive aim. Everything that you need for a night vision match. A 7.62x39 AK is going to have a bit more recoil than an AR. It's going to be slower to reload. The ammunition in the weapon are going to be a lot heavier, but it's not really much of a gimmick, at least for a night vision match where most of the shots are taken at very close range or against larger steel targets. I know gimmick weapon and night vision setups are kind of a staple of a Forgotten Weapons Moons Out match, but this year I kind of just wanted to run something normal. Before the match, I put about 300 rounds through the PSAK 104 to get it zeroed and make sure the Texas Weapon Systems furniture didn't fall apart or affect function in any way. It seemed like the gun was good to go. I did have a couple lingering concerns about the AK and the accessories setup. Remember that in the video I did about the PSAK 104, I talked about how I had a persistent issue with the trigger reset. After doing a lot of polishing work to the PSA parts kit trigger, it has been working fine for me for several hundred rounds. However, while I was in Virginia, I did ask Giga from Polinar Tactical to put a couple mags through my gun. He gave it a half-hearted thumbs up, however, he did have the trigger fail to reset once when he was shooting it.
Uh-oh. It's happening again.
Yeah, the reset is kind of strange.
My other concern was the durability of the DIR-V laser. It's not a cheap unit by any means, but I find it hard to trust these things, especially the selector switch. They just feel flimsy to me. I was hoping the switch could survive 2 nights of being constantly fiddled with in the cold, and it wouldn't pop off. Thankfully, the DIR-V worked just fine. It didn't break, and it didn't lose 0. However, my handguard did lose 0, immediately, on the first stage of the first night of the match.
Oh, it's way off. Man, I'm suffering.
I started out with a couple of hits, and then I started getting misses, and I kept missing for the rest of the stage. Despite being installed with basically as much torque as I thought the material could handle and drowned in Vibratite, it still worked its way loose. There's a little wedge block that goes into the trunnion that started to back out slightly, then the barrel clamp got a little bit loose, and then the handguard would rotate left to right, so I would miss to the left one shot, take the exact same shot with the exact same hold, and miss to the right at a distance of about 30 to 50 yards. For the rest of the stages on night 1, I just shot what I call passive plus, so passive aiming through the red dot, but using the illuminator on the laser aiming module, because even though the laser designator wasn't going to help me, at least the illuminator would allow me to identify targets more easily in dark conditions. This can be a viable technique depending on the conditions, the positions that you're shooting from, and also the way that you have your light and laser set up. For me, it was a bit of an issue because with my low optic and my low mounted laser, I still had a problem where if I put my thumb on the fire button, it would block pretty much the entire optic. So what I had to do from a lot of firing positions was double tap the fire button to get the laser to stick in constant on mode, then move my thumb out of the way so I could actually take the shot, then go back to the laser, turn it off so that I could move without flashing my laser up in the air and costing myself a bunch of penalties. Or just straight up getting ejected from the match for a safety violation, because flashing your laser over the berm is similar to sending a round over the berm, at least in a night vision match when a lot of guys are running bootleg full power PEC 15s. The rest of the first night of the competition actually went pretty well. Once I realized that I couldn't rely on my laser, I didn't try to use it again, and I actually shot pretty good passive.
That's the way the news goes, Aunt Jemima. Or something.
Yeah, it works. They're right here.
The worst issue I had, other than the ergonomic conflict of my thumb blocking the optic, was on one stage where I was trying to take some shots, but our thermal drone, which was following us around, getting us some of this sick footage, was directly overhead. And it has some kind of a proximity or like a landing light sensor or something like that, which is an IR strobe that flashes and made it pretty damn hard to see because it was reflecting off of my body, my arms, and my optic.
Fuck, I can only see the drone. Can you wave off the drone? I can only see his fucking proc sensor.
Trying.
So for the second day of the match, in order to give myself the best chance possible, I re-tightened the handguard as much as I could, cranking down the hex screws to the point where the metal was screaming in pain. It also probably helped that the handguard had backed out to the point where the front of it was actually contacting the handguard retaining cap. Normally on the Texas Weapon Systems furniture, the handguard retaining cap just kind of floats loose in there. It's no longer part of holding the handguard on.
Well, the handguard feels sturdy.
So far, that's more rounds than it made it last night, so.
But is this normal? Like it has a bit of
Yeah, I need a
movement?
mallet to smack it back into place, so it's just torqued in place right now. It's actually being held in place partially by the handguard end cap. So maybe that'll help.
Oh.
In my case, maybe it was providing a third point of contact and kept the handguard from loosening up for the second night. Before the match started, again, I did a hasty re-zero. I co-aligned the laser with the optic at about 50 feet on a tree, which was good enough for close range and the larger targets.
Moving! All right, you're finished. Unload. Show clear.
I went back to almost exclusively using the laser module on night 2, although I probably should have kept passive aiming in my back pocket a little bit more often, especially on the last stage. By then, the moon was well overhead and the targets were a bit further out, so the added precision of passive aiming would have really come in handy versus my hasty 50-foot converging zero.
We're coming for you, Barbie! Come on.
Aside from my handguard woes, the PSAK 104 American Bastard ran pretty damn good. I shot exclusively suppressed with the Wolfpack Armory Disruptor 30 suppressor, and the ammunition I was using was all AAC. It's their new 7.62x39 Saber Blade stuff, which has an odd, very shiny case that has a slick coating, but at least it doesn't feel as greasy as their 5.7. Between the match and the rest of the shooting we did just hanging around in the daytime, that was about 600 rounds over the course of 2 days, and there was one malfunction. I had a single stovepipe jam, which I believe may have been caused by the optics setup. It seems like it's tricky to mount optics to an AK without at least partially interfering with the ejection path. I had the red dot mounted as far forward as I could on the rail, which is basically in line with the ejection port. There are a lot of dings on the dust cover that look like there are casings hitting it, and maybe the hint of a ding on the optics clamp itself. In some of the thermal drone footage, you can see casings getting yeeted out at high velocity, which is very typical for the AK, and then the odd casing that just sort of dribbles out instead, which in my mind is indicative of that casing hitting something it's not supposed to when it's trying to make a run for the hills. The PSAK 104 shoots pretty damn good suppressed because it is very under-gassed from the factory.
Wolverines! AK, more like A-gay.
So, I already told you I did way worse this year than I did last year. I racked up massive penalties on the first stage, which pretty much ended my match about 90 seconds after it started. Moons Out and other brutality-style matches are really a game of avoiding penalties, which are so extreme that they kind of make the actual raw stage performance unimportant. I shot pretty well on all the stages where I didn't rack up penalties, but unfortunately those penalties, which are 60 seconds each in a Moons match, are pretty much insurmountable. I can give you an example of how little the actual recorded stage time matters. On one stage, my time was accidentally recorded as being twice as long as it really was. As a result, I scored 40 places lower than I should have. If you fix that number in practice score, my overall match standing would improve by, I think, 2 places. In a match where most of the stages are between 1 and 3 minutes long, a single 60-second penalty is gonna fuck your day up. Basically, it's the kind of competition that gives competition shooters the shits, which is why I love it.
Okay, you're coming with me, buddy. We're gonna get you out of here. Your belly is full of drugs. Time!
I think the big appeal of Moons Out is to challenge yourself and to pressure test your weapon and your gear setups. There's a big problem-solving element because you have to shoot through stages that are set up for you by another person. Situations that you wouldn't set up for yourself, not just because they're so complicated that you could never pull this off except at the scale that something like Moons Out takes place. They have a stage where you shoot from the back of a moving Humvee, but they also just have like 100+ pieces of steel across 10 different stages. I don't think there's a single drill you could put together and shoot with your buddies in the woods that would approximate even one of the more basic stages at Moons Out. You're also forced to shoot for several hours in a row over the course of the night as conditions change, not just the weather, but also the ambient lighting conditions. This means a lot of guys get forced into awkward shooting positions that they've never really considered setting up for themselves, or they're shooting in darker conditions than they would normally because they just don't go out unless there's a nice moon, or because they shoot out in the open on a flat range instead of under deep, dark tree cover. Basically, I'm saying you should consider going. One of the other big appeals of Moons Out is that there is an extensive prize table with a whole bunch of stuff supplied by the different match sponsors. And because Moons Out is really more of an individual challenge, it's a very friendly environment. Everybody is competing mostly against themselves, the environment, and the conditions of the evening, which can be pretty cold, or maybe wet, or maybe cold and wet. The prize table is random draw, so nobody is going to be bickering over who technically got first, second, or third place because a Mall C1 hangs in the balance. Instead, the names are drawn from a hat, and even a guy who passed out from heat stroke on stage 1 and didn't wake up until the next morning could still win. I don't know what the best prize was this year. There was a Q boombox with suppressor on the table. Obviously, I left that right where it was, and I claimed my rightful prize, a bottle of Frosty Coors Light.
Did you get worst in show again?
I love you, Hop.
Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you guys very much for watching. A very big thank you to Forgotten Weapons for having me out for this match. A big thank you to One Shepherd and the Echo Valley Training Center for hosting this match. And a big thank you to the extensive list of sponsors who provide stuff for the prize table and make this sort of thing possible. I'd like to think people would still go to these events if there wasn't a prize table, but I don't know. Winning cool stuff is a powerful motivator. See you guys next time.
I love it.
You love everything.